Citizens, which is a program of Power to the River, which is a group of ranchers, farmers, and other concerned residents that are working to educate and empower the community to address air pollution, contaminated water, and the resulting health problems that are caused by oil, field, and gas contamination in Wyoming. Right? Right on. Okay, Deb, can you say a little something so we can make sure we can hear you? Because we are using this tiny little speaker phone here, and I am really not sure if we can hear that. So, we might want to get our tech person on that. Okay, so
I don't think
for our panelists that are in the room, and Deb, we're still working on your audio, girlfriend, but we're gonna get you, I swear to you. For our panelists that are in the room, what I want you to start off with is just telling us what, in your work, environmental justice means.
Okay. I guess it's in indigenous communities or native communities. I think it would be safe to say environmental justice is really interconnected with a very broad range of issues that we deal with in native communities. So, like from direct action protecting bison to revitalizing culture, and just an example of revitalizing culture. Say that we want to revitalize our traditional food diet. That's culture. So that deals with preserving and protecting areas where we gather these natural foods.
Mm-hmm.
What else is there? It's interconnected with revitalizing horse culture. It's connected with protecting water. I guess it's just environmental justice is directly connected with pretty much everything we do culturally as indigenous people.
And I understand that there are how many people in the Wanapum?
There's a core of probably 65 people, depending on what season it is. During the fishing season, which runs from the spring to the fall, we have a fluctuation of relatives coming back to do salmon fishing.
So up to about 150?
Not even that, probably 75.
Really, and that is the whole, the total tribal members that you guys?
Growing up, there was only 3 households left, and it was my grandfather, his brother, and his sister. So we were actually almost extinct.
So, John, transit justice. How is that environmental justice?
Well, we come to the work, I think, from a civil rights perspective. Environmental justice. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here with members of the tribal communities and everything that you guys work on as CJ, and it's different in the federalized American system where a lot of people think of it as an environmental issue, but that's really a more recent phenomenon. It really is an outgrowth of the civil rights movement. The inception of the environmental justice movement, which I use air quotes because it's not a real thing. We talk about the movement, but really it's a bunch of local initiatives, community-based, place-based initiatives, and we have some networks and connections, but it really is an outgrowth of civil rights in Warren County, North Carolina in the early 80s with PCB landfills. But, if you go back to the civil rights era, transportation justice was one of the central underpinnings of Dr. King's work and the work of the civil rights era. And it's always been a civil rights issue. And what we've seen maybe in the last 15 years or so is we've seen a number of different groups around the country, most predominantly the LA Bus Riders really embrace transit justice work because it sits right at the intersection of civil rights, of environmental health issues, of basic access to opportunities, a lifeline. Transit is a lifeline to everything that you want to do, particularly if you live in an urban environment and don't own a car. So it really is fundamental to just accessing basic quality of life and positive, healthy outcomes. But we take a narrow approach to the definition of environmental justice. It is fair treatment and equal protection of people of color, of low-income communities, of communities that are traditionally underrepresented or marginalized. It is not environmentalism for everybody. That's what environmentalism is. And so, in Oregon particularly, and I'm going to guess that there's some similar dominant white culture stuff going on here as well. But we have to be really firm about not letting the dominant white environmental movement co-opt environmental justice work. And so we try to take a very firm line about what environmental justice means. Now that said, the issues that can fall under that umbrella are very broad. But the communities that we're working with, communities that we're working to empower, we take a relatively narrow and firm line on that. So.
And I've also, I've heard it said and read in a few places that another definition of environmental justice is sort of environmental justice, sort of falls in the place where environmentalism, like in the cracks, where the broader environmental movement is, largely a mainstream-led movement, where environmental justice actually looks back on those same communities that you, and more focused on the people, the built environment, the natural environment, and those intersections, and the people that are affected by those intersections. So
yeah. I would say the one last thing is you hear a lot of talk about equity, and we try to distance ourselves from that because equity is the term actually came up as a response to environmental racism, and it's government speak, and it's a word that became safe to use for white folks because racism makes them uncomfortable. And environmental justice was actually the compromise in terms of the frame. And we're kind of, I don't know about here, but at least in Oregon, we're losing that middle ground where we're slipping back to this equity speak. And I think equity has a place in the conversation. To me, it's talking about the data and the problem. Justice is when you actually meaningfully involve the folks who are most impacted and you develop that leadership. And so that's the perspective that we bring.
Okay. Hey, Dad, are you with us? So can you sort of talk about in Wyoming what environmental justice sort of means for the folks in Wyoming? Can you hear us, Deb? Oh yeah, you can, but we can't hear you. So hold on, we're gonna hook you up here.
I'm gonna call you back.
All right. Yeah, no, it's really no bother. I mean, we all understand that technology is what it is, and sometimes it fails us.
Oh, there you are. Okay, did you hear Karen's question?
I heard the first part of it. I heard her say she couldn't hear me.
So introduce your organization and define environmental justice for us, Deb.
Sure. I think that in Wyoming, of course, because we provide so much energy for the rest of the country, I think that environmental justice is really lacking for the people who live in Wyoming, particularly those who are living in the areas that are being developed. Of course, the people who have the most money and the most power, or the people that have the most money have the most power. And so the people who are living in the areas that are being developed don't have as much money as the people who are developing the fossil fuels. And so consequently, they don't have clean water, they don't have clean air, and sadly, we're seeing that their health is severely impacted. So there really is no environmental justice for those people. I think what happens is there's a very thin line between environmental justice for all and environmental justice for the people who are living at ground zero. The people who are there in the oil patch or in the gas patch are the canaries in the coal mine. We know that they're being impacted, but I think what other people are missing that are further away from the development is that their water, their air, and their health too is not being protected. That they are victims of environmental injustice or injustice or whatever.
Okay, Deb, so tell us about the work that you're doing with the Pavilion Concerned Citizens.
Sure. Well, Powder River Basin Resource Council was originally founded in the early 70s over strip mine reclamation. At that time in the Powder River Basin of Wyoming and Montana and South Dakota. At that time, there were a lot of strip mines for coal moving into the area, and there was nothing in place for any kind of remediation. So the people who lived on the land in those areas were really concerned about what was going to happen. Because for those of you who don't know, strip mining has huge impacts. Basically, it's huge holes in the ground that go on for miles and miles. And as I said, there was no reclamation. So since the 70s, we've worked primarily with people who are live on the land, who are out, usually ranchers and farmers. We've done a lot of work on ag issues, food issues, for small farmers. We're purely grassroots, so we represent only our members. And so our members